You could not stress how critical this metal is for our humanity and our freedom and our future progress.
They now have to keep printing or we crash.
We've got this ticking time bomb.
Talking gold with the one and only Andrew Maguire.
Welcome to Live from the Vault.
Welcome to Live from the Vault, brought to you by Kinesis Money, and this is the show that goes beyond the headlines to uncover the truth about the gold and silver markets with world-renowned whistleblower and industry expert, the one and only Andrew Maguire. And this week, he'll be joined in the vault by special guest and by popular demand, Dr. Stephen Leeb. And to learn more about Dr. Stephen Leeb, if you haven't already met him, we're going to leave a link in the description below. So let's head over right now to the UK and let's find out what's happening. Over to you, Andrew.
Welcome, Stephen. Thank you so much. I just looked a little while ago. It's been a year. It was actually May 2024. I can't believe it. That we last spoke, but you were so far ahead of the game. You were talking about, on your front burner was multipolarity and about taking barriers down, and the peace that could create. Let's pick up the thread from there, Stephen, if we may.
Well, I think what's happened since then, Andy, is that the dollar basically has lost a lot of its standing, in my opinion. And you look for basically connections, things that you can, say, this is happening that you really haven't seen before. And you really look at what other people are doing, people that, shouldn't be doing what they're doing, all of a sudden are taking notice and appear to be kind of changing direction. And you also take notice, and I know I've made this point before in your show, that gold is not just some ordinary metal. I mean, it's an extraordinarily special metal. It's, as you've pointed out repeatedly, it's the only other tier one asset out there. And if you look at the behavior of gold versus, let's say, the behavior of the dollar, its competitor, just since 1971, when Nixon took us off the gold standard, you find that, the dollar is worth, I think, around a penny or something. Gold's gone up from $35 or so to over $3,000, and a couple of pennies. I mean, it's not much of a choice if you have anything resembling a long-term horizon. Now, one thing that has really intrigued me and really surprised me, this is not something I got on my own, though I was sort of aware of the fact that Buffett's father was, very much of a gold bug. And Buffett himself has a history of accumulating precious metals, in particular silver. And in fact, I think he was the largest silver holder. And for all we know, he still may be. And his comments have been very quizzical and sort of against type. And there was always a question about Buffett. I mean, people pay a tremendous amount of attention to him for very good reason. I mean, he's probably the most successful investor in the history of capitalism. I mean, putting it very simply. And things are going on with Warren Buffett and with what he's been saying and perhaps what he's been doing. Certainly, the obvious things he's been doing suggest something very different is going on, and not necessarily related to his age. I mean, I know he's about 94 years old, but I listened to him for about 2 hours, and I've never listened to anybody for 2 hours before on YouTube. I mean, but it was a fascinating conversation, and so have his last letters. And so has his behavior, and not just recently. I'm talking since 2010, basically. And 2010 sort of marked kind of the beginning of a rise in a market that was being totally driven by Federal Reserve policy. It wasn't being driven by fundamentals. I mean, you cannot take a look at this economy today and say that you should have 7 stocks that are, trading at 25, 30 times earnings. You have basically not enough electricity in the economy to power these kinds of stocks, and there are a number of things that don't make a lot of sense. So, in line with this, a couple of things have really, really struck me, and I'm just going to quote from Buffett, from his letter from about, I think, 2 years ago. It hasn't changed. I mean, his thinking, as far as I can tell, has not changed at all. Again, quoting, I believe, this is probably 2023 or 4, I believe Berkshire can handle financial, in italics, disasters of a magnitude beyond any heretofore experienced. This is not something he's ever said before. This ability is one we will not relinquish. When economic upsets occur, as they will, Berkshire's goal will be to function as an asset to the country. But as it was in a very minor way in 2008-9, and to help extinguish the financial fire, rather than to be among the many companies that inadvertently or otherwise ignited that conflagration. Those are quotes. Now, he goes back to 2008-9, and he's talking about helping in a little way. Well, it wasn't really just a little way, because if it hadn't been for Warren Buffett in 2008-9, a not so little company named Goldman Sachs would no longer exist. I mean, you can go back and you can see their comments about what Buffett did. I mean, he didn't single-handedly bail out Goldman Sachs, but he has that kind of reputation, so that when he took a preferred position, in preferred stock in their company, it allowed them to raise money, without which, in their own words, in their own emails, the quote was, "We were toast." And they were toast. They were facing a major conflict regarding American International Group at that time. They did not have the money. They desperately needed money, without which Goldman Sachs would have gone broke. Now, in this very brief comment, which comes after in the same letter, I won't read it, his comment that Berkshire Hathaway, in a GAAP term that's counting, it's like every day on Bloomberg, you'll see, or at least for a while, you were saying, so-and-so has become the richest man in the world. What does this mean? That his stock price went up? That's all that means. In Buffett's case, he goes to point out that in terms of GAAP earnings, Berkshire Hathaway is the largest company on the S&P 500. It represents about 6% of the value of the S&P 500. It's a tremendous amount. At this point, he's making this comment at a time when, since 2010, his behavior has not been at all typical in the following sense. The rate in which he's been accumulating cash, or T-bonds, on his balance sheet since then till now, till the last report in March, has been at a 19% annualized rate. I'm sorry I don't have a chart, but it's exponential. And he has sold everything. I mean, the only stocks that he's talked about buying, and he has been buying, are Japanese stocks. He has not taken any meaningful position in U.S. stocks. His cash position, or cash or short-term security position, at the end of March was something like $350 billion. And that compared with something like $50 billion in 2010, when markets started rising. It's been a steady, and it's been a dramatic rise since then. Its cash position has gone from 15% of assets to 30% of assets. That's extraordinary. I mean, this is over a 60-year period. I mean, however long he's been managing money. I mean, you've never seen anything like that. And he is buying. I mean, he's, you can't really fault him for, you can't really say it's age. Yeah, maybe, but to a certain extent. But he's made a lot of trips to Japan, and he's, shown, a great deal of interest in these Japanese companies, etc. Now, what was interesting too, a number of things have been interesting. If you just see if I can get this thing on, I just want to quote his father, because I think this is one of the most important things. And I want to say, when I heard you and Andy Schlechtman talking the other day, last week, I think, it's sort of like really touched me, because you were really talking about peace in the world, and you were talking about it in the context of gold. And that really is so important to remember. I mean, I know we're talking on a day when gold has gone through $3,200, and people are probably getting a little bit upset. And okay, I can tell you one person that is not at all upset if he has taken a position in gold. It's Warren Buffett. I mean, this is like, nonsense to him. I mean, as far as it's concerned. I mean, it really sort of describes what you've been describing. I mean, they set up a chart that looks like a double top in gold, and, so it goes through 3,200, and maybe it'll go to 3,000. I don't know. But I mean, anytime you start doing numbers on where gold should be at, you start probably at around 10,000. And then it goes up from there. I'm not talking about necessarily in the next 6 or 8 months, but I mean, I'll get to that. But I first want to read this about Warren Buffett's father, because it so ties into what you and Andy were saying last week, and it really touched me. Here it is. This will show you that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, or maybe in this case, as bright as his father was, maybe the tree doesn't grow that far from the apple. But whatever. I mean, the father, again, he started a brokerage firm in the 30s. He had to support a family. And that's where he saw the money. And it was probably very close to a major market bottom when he did it. And I'm just quoting from a piece that he wrote in the Commercial and Financial Chronicle of May 6th, 1948, which I believe is still very relevant. And he at that time was a congressman. He had served, I think, 4 terms in the U.S. Congress from Nebraska, and well respected. And I'm quoting him again. Is there a connection between human freedom and a gold redeemable money? At first glance, it would seem that money belongs to the world of economics and human freedom to this political sphere. Makes sense at first glance anyway. But when you recall that one of the first moves by Lenin, Mussolini, and Hitler was to outlaw individual ownership of gold, you begin to sense that there may be some connection between money redeemable in gold and the rare prize known as human liberty. And then he goes on to mention also, second paragraph, and then I won't read anymore. Also, when you find that Lenin declared and demonstrated it a sure way to overturn the existing social order and bring about communism was by printing press money, then again, you are impressed with the possibility of a relationship between a gold-backed money and human freedom. And this is where it's all about. And this is, really a point that I know I've made on your show before. I mean, going back to Jefferson, people like that. I hate to go talk about Jefferson on a British television show, but I mean, it's true. Britain and a lot of countries have a, history of gold, and especially China, and especially I would say a number of countries that we don't think of as necessarily free, et cetera. Gold is critical, and the U.S. was free. I would argue much freer when we were under the gold standard than without it. And we have deteriorated in this country to such an extent that right now we're facing a situation that it's unprecedented. I mean, you have these stocks that are trading again at these extraordinarily high multiples, and we don't have enough skilled workers to provide the upgrades we need to the electrical grid. This is also from Buffett, who has a major position in electricity, Berkshire Hathaway, Berkshire Energy. I mean, our grid is antiquated, and we're not going to, be able to connect things unless, we basically cooperate with the rest of the world. And I think that is where it comes down to. I really feel that we're in a position at this point, either we cooperate or we are basically not going to be recognizable in a very, very, very near term. And I think that a lot of things, when you have a big deal coming down the track, it's not unusual to see, or in fact, you'd expect to see it connected to all sorts of other things that are happening.
Yeah.
Gold plays an essential role because what we're missing, Andy, is this whole aspect that Warren Buffett's father talked about, human freedom and gold. If the government controls the money, completely controls the money, and you have money that is courtesy of the government controls you. They can do whatever they want. So government is fighting with everything they have to maintain their control right now. I mean, the things you learn when you study gold, I really owe a lot to you. I mean, I do believe gold is going to be just essential for human progress. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt about it. And if that turns out the case, I think it'll turn out that you were probably the first person to really point how important gold is, because why else would they have been manipulating it to the extent that they were? And it is very important. And they're going to do everything in their power to manipulate gold. There is no doubt. If they have to create a double top on a chart, whatever it is, it doesn't mean a thing unless you're going to give up on the world. I mean, basically, it's gold or nothing at this point. One thing that is also very curious, and this is something that's bothered me for about at least 10 years when I first heard it, 10 or 15 years. I wasn't always that interested in gold. I became very interested when I started seeing all these connections between gold. I would say about 15 years ago, 20 years ago, maybe. And I, noted Buffett. I knew that he owned a lot of silver back in the 90s. I think it was the 90s where he had the number one position. And about gold, he had a very curious thing. Now, this is coming from someone who is extraordinarily intelligent, and maybe he's the most intelligent American alive today. I mean, seriously, even at 94. His partner, Charlie Munger, had a different view of gold. And Munger recently died. So that's why it's curious to hear that this quote from Buffett himself came, after, he praised Munger, and I don't think, he was ready to ever really go against him. I think Munger was very, very unhappy when he bought the silver, to be very honest. And Munger made some very tough comments about gold. I mean, I don't even want to repeat them. They were, things that probably shouldn't be said, although I think that he was also a spiritual guy. I think both of them. They loved doing what they were doing, but they did not necessarily mean that they loved making money for the sake of money. They didn't view that as their end goal. They viewed, enjoying whatever, spiritual things. Well, Munger left, and you see, Buffett, I think, basically kind of, recognizing in a way what his father had, said, and he was brought up in this home. I mean, very close background. In fact, if one of the things you go to when you hear his meetings and or listen to them, not to the extent that I did recently, but even just briefly, you'll find his 93-year-old sister there. I mean, there's a closeness in his family. It's a very similar culture to what you see in Japan. I mean, Japan too, but also in China and in a lot of these Eastern cultures. I mean, they're spiritual. It's what we started out with. It's where we were. But we started going wrong, with this Russian hatred after the Second World War. I know I'm going on and on about different history lessons, but I think it's important for people to understand gold is not just some isolated metal. It's something that has extraordinarily special properties. It glows. It's yellow. It is something that it's not explainable. We cannot explain it by just looking at physics. I mean, we say you can't. There's nothing we could do. I mean, it's very deeply involved with quantum physics and relativity, et cetera, to get to this color. This is something that, it has a spiritual quality all to its own. I mean, it's, you go on, the first thing you learn about gold is that you can't destroy it. Impossible to destroy. During the Second World War, the French used to dissolve their Olympic medals in gold. They dissolved their gold medals in acid. I'm sorry. When the war was over, they recovered everything that was destroyed. Gold cannot be destroyed. It can be dissolved, but you cannot destroy it. It's really the hardest metal in the world to destroy. Plus, you can make a lot of gold. You can cover or decorate religious artifacts with a very small amount of gold. You can stretch it an ounce of gold miles, and you can make many square kilometers out of gold. You can decorate an entire church with an ounce of gold. I mean, how does this happen? Well, it's not. It doesn't happen in an easy way. I mean, there's no easy explanation as to why this came about. And it spells something that's really very, very special. And it's not an accident, in my opinion, that every religion in the world, gold has a major role, whether it's Muslim, whether it's Christianity, whether it's Confucius and Buddhism, or whether it's Hinduism, etc. Gold's special across the world. How did this happen? I mean, how's everyone that is so different? I mean, you had the Crusades, Muslims fighting Christians. I mean, everything, yet they all agree on the importance of gold. It's the one thing that can bring everybody in the world together. There's virtually no one in this world of ours, Andy, that doesn't, no culture. It's not, civilization, I think is a very bad word to use, because civilizations, they come and they go, but they basically, if the culture has been around long enough, the civilization will reemerge. It's hard to see how it's going to happen. And the big thing here, getting back to economics, what you're looking at today, what I also looked at today, is you all of a sudden have T-bonds trading, 10-year bonds trading at 4.5%. That's a no-no. I mean, that's a sign that the bond market believes inflation is coming, and it's coming in a big way. And that takes us right back to Buffett again. This is something he's been totally consistent about, that inflation is the worst thing that can happen. And I know I sort of got interrupted myself. One thing I want to bring out also about Buffett is that when asked about gold, he was very well known years ago for kind of shutting down the gold market back in 2011, when we made that top in gold. He came up with the analogy, and he knows better than to say something like this, that when you look at gold, you could put all the gold in the world in a swimming pool. Do you remember that analogy that he made? And what would you rather have? All that gold or stocks? Well, that's not an analogy that makes any sense. I mean, it's like saying, what would you rather have? A gift certificate for $1,000, or would you rather have the gifts? Well, it depends. If you think that the gifts are going to go down in value, I'd rather hold on to the gift certificate. I mean, if the gifts are going to be worth, let's say, $500, because, I love the gifts, but I know I'm going to be able to buy them at $500. I'd much rather have the gift certificate. Come on. I mean, he knows gold's a currency. Gold's something you buy stocks with. It's not something you compare to stocks. Now, it just happens that if you go back to the beginning of this century, gold has outperformed stocks. But that's kind of an anomaly. I mean, that's not what you really own gold for, to outperform stocks. You own it as a currency. I mean, you want it as a currency. Now, the point being, making an analogy like this for someone as bright as Buffett, maybe for someone like me, okay, I just misunderstood it. But I mean, it's a silly analogy. But because it was Buffett, you would be surprised. And I was talking to people at that time that I said, why can't you, get people interested in gold? He said, Buffett. It's this analogy. And he keeps coming back to it. I think he was very much aware of what he was doing. You don't hear those analogies anymore coming out of Buffett. Instead, you hear things that suggest that gold makes so much sense for him to own at this point, because I do believe it's going to go up. And if it doesn't go up and America goes down, what difference does it make anyway? I mean, what you own. But if America's going to survive, it's going to survive because he's going to be able to protect it. And I notice you're looking at your screen. Yes, gold it'll come back. I think. I don't think this thing.
No worries. This is bargain territory.
No, I'm a little worried. I mean, I think it's natural. I mean, we've had a lot of false breakouts before. This is not going to be one, in the sense that it has to work. I mean, it will.
I mean, this is so interesting because what you're doing is bringing a whole different way of looking at it. And most people don't look at it in the way you've just talked about. And I think, but when we talked about, I think last time we talked about this multipolar world, but what we're seeing, I think really gold to me, from a practical sense, in order to, for the multipolar world to survive, you've got look, I think, wind back for 1 second. You've got a unipolar world where, for example, tariffs are a perfect example, where it's a win-lose. You win, I lose, one way or the other. Now, multipolar, but how does a multipolar world, what's the glue that binds it together? It's a single currency. It's gold. It's only, you benchmark everything on one thing and one thing only.
You're saying exactly, except you said in 30 words what it took me probably 3,000 words to say. I mean, yes, you're exactly right. That is it. You need some glue to tie the world together. And the only glue that we know of, in terms of what makes us creative, is what makes us spiritual. I mean, and what makes us creative is what makes humankind progress, move along a positive trajectory. If you lose that creativity, you're not going to go anywhere. I mean, Harvard's gone from number 1 to number 101 in 20 years or 10 years. I mean, it's extraordinary. China, at the beginning of the century, how many Chinese research organizations were in the top 20 or in the top 500 in terms of STEM, in terms of modern technologies? None. Now 20. They dominated, completely dominated. And this is a spirituality. This comes from a humanity within them. And it's a culture. It's a person. America right now doesn't have a problem of being stupid. We're not stupid people in the traditional sense. We have a personality problem. Creativity correlates much more strongly. Technology, scientific success correlates much more strongly with creativity than it will with IQ. IQ is important. It might be a necessary condition, but not an IQ of 150 or 200, not 800 or 1600 on your SAT scores. No, you don't need that. You might need, 1200 or 1300, and you could become a very famous. I mean, it was said Richard Feynman, who was one of the greatest American physicists, or maybe one of the greatest physicists, worked with Freeman Dyson, etc. I mean, he had SAT scores that were probably equivalent to, maybe 1100, 1200. He didn't have, super high IQs and super high AI, what we call AI, but he was an extraordinarily creative guy. Played the bongo drums. I mean, when you hear stories about these people, what stands out is their creativity. It's not their intelligence per se. Yes, there are examples, but of people that were exceedingly intelligent in certain areas. But you take people like Dirac, Paul Dirac, who was one of the most famous physicists, British. I mean, all these famous physicists, quantum physicists, came out of the European community that, really created the physics revolution of the 20th century. They were very few Americans. Feynman was kind of, but basically it was Freeman Dyson. It was a British guy that tied everything together. It's not well known, but he probably should have gotten the Nobel Prize, not Feynman. But Feynman was also very creative. He was exceptionally creative. But it came from a creative culture. And this is what America is lacking now. This is what has happened. We've become a country. You put your word on. You nailed it when you talked about zero sum and everything is win-lose. That's not the way it's supposed to be. I mean, right now we have. I've never cared much for Donald Trump. I'll be very honest. For one thing, I went to the same school he did. He reminds me how old I am because I was in exactly his class. But on the other hand, he's got a lot of vigor. So, there's a positive aspect to him too, because he reminds me, maybe I will write that 10th book that I've been trying to write. But basically, one thing I believe that he has going for him, strangely enough, he's not a win-lose guy. He's not a zero-sum guy. I think he believes that if we don't have peace in the world, it's lose-lose. It's either win-win or lose-lose. We view right now, our culture has morphed into this thing called exceptionalism, American exceptionalism. That's not a win-lose culture. That's win. I mean, that is a win-lose culture. We're treating our adversaries, other countries, like we treat sports teams, like it's win-lose. Either you succeed in soccer. I mean, it's one thing to if you lose there was an episode in Brazil a few years ago, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, when a goalie let in a goal and they killed the goalie. I mean, okay, that's a sporting event. It's a horrible, horrible story. But that's not how the world is going to exist. The world's in a, if you will, a win-lose situation. Either the world wins or the world loses. It's not like one country in the world wins and the other countries lose. That's not going to work. In fact, if that works, we're already on the losing end. We've already don't have the technology that's going to allow us to succeed. And it's very interesting what you've also seen with respect to gold and the Chinese recently. Again, there was until 2022, you never really heard too much about what the Chinese were doing technologically. Everybody thought that Huawei was going to go broke, and it was the end of Huawei because of all the sanctions. Instead of a Sputnik moment, we had a moment where we decided to put everybody down. And we decided to sanction China and make it impossible. Well, it wasn't impossible. I mean, It's very hard to bury a culture of 5,000 years. I'm not saying China hasn't had a number of civilizations that were horrible. Mao, did a lot of terrible things, etc. But they also brought 400 million people out of poverty. But it's a culture that survives. That's what really defines a people. And the civilizations will always come back if the culture is there. And you've seen that in Russia. I'm repeating myself. When Putin took over Russia in year 2000, that's not too long ago, 25 years ago, Russia, you know what Russia's GDP per capita was? $1,000. People were starving. Literally starving. I mean, they didn't have money. That money was vodka. If you wanted to, get someone to repair something, you had to give them vodka. And they were handed out vodka as currency. The U.S. wanted to destroy Russia. This goes back to, 1946. It goes back to the first head of our CIA was a German spy. He came from Hitler's army. I mean, not the first head, but the major factor in the CIA that we started was someone who hated Russia. This kind of thinking still goes on today.
Yeah.
Why do people hate China? Can anyone tell me why people view China as such a threat when the last war China fought was in 1979? And it was a 3-month skirmish. It was over in 3 months. Before that, there was Korea. When was the last war China started? I think you have to go back, 1,000 years. Every war that they've been involved in was because of some other factor that never lasted. We haven't spent a year not fighting a war in this country. To me, we're the ones that are, that you have to be careful about. So, yeah, I think that gold has to, it's now or never. If we're not going to make it, we are going to lose to such an extent. I mean, another thing that came out recently, a couple of other things that came out recently, all of a sudden you see China talking about their, and they never talked about this stuff before. You talked about their successes in quantum computers. Now, again, I hate getting off of these derivative topics, but they're not so derivative. Quantum computers are idiot savants. They, we talk about them as if they're things that we should worship again. They're not. They can do certain things extraordinarily well, maybe. But one thing, if they can do one thing at all, it is to factor extraordinarily large numbers, like numbers with 1,000 digits following them. They can find two factors. Why is that important? Because it's the whole key to cryptography. If you cannot factor, as long as you can't factor large numbers, cryptography is safe. Bitcoin is safe. But if you figure out a way of beating this and factoring large numbers, there's no more cryptography. Guess what? Paper published recently by the Chinese were very close. We can now factor numbers with 1,000 zeros after them or whatever, 1,000. That means that the end of cryptography as we know it is in sight. And that's kind of like a short message. Hey guys, if you're going to want another currency, guess what? If you pick Bitcoin, we probably can steal it. It might not be tomorrow, but we're very close. I mean, people, you might argue, well, you're not as close as you're saying. Well, you are. You're very close. They have figured out a way of, translating this problem to something else. Peer-reviewed journal. I'm not talking about something that you're reading on South China Post. I'm talking about something you're reading in scientific journals. This is a compelling argument against Bitcoin. Not going to work.
Interesting.
Compelling argument against cryptography as a long-term solution to anything. Now, as for gold, if you want to compare it, how much gold has been destroyed since we've been mining it? As far as I know, none. It's indestructible. That's another aspect to it. Bitcoin is not indestructible. It might have another 2 months of life left, or it might have another 5 years, but you're getting there. You're getting to the point that its invulnerability, so-called invulnerability, no longer. So, I mean, that's, it is also telling you something, and it's telling you they want us to join. They want us to cooperate. And I think you saw, the way that those negotiations took place was very, very interesting. I mean, they settled everything in 2 days. I mean, they basically, now they have a 90-day respite. Now maybe they're going to, now I'm looking at gold, but basically, I think the U.S. gave up. I mean, they realized that they were in a lot of trouble. And that, you see, again, coming back to T-bonds at 4.5%, the dollar had a nice pickup after the Chinese made that deal. But now it's starting to come down again. Interest rates are starting to go back up, and inflation is starting to get a hold. And it's game over if inflation takes off. And what's to hold it back? I mean, where's the productivity coming from if we don't have the technologies? If we cannot even build out data centers, if we have a grid that's 100 years old, we are. This is from McKinsey. We are 45,000 or 450,000 short of skilled workers to build out our grid. This is one of the problems. Without a grid, we don't have AI. Even if you believed AI, even if you want to worship AI, you're not going to have AI if you don't have the electricity. How are you going to get the electricity? Another thing that you don't have enough of. Guess what? All of a sudden, oil. In February of this year, 2025, the last statistics released by the EIA in this country, oil production fell to a 2-year low. Why? Because it costs $60 to produce oil in this country. And those costs have been going up at about 3 to 4 or 5% a year. You don't see this in the CPI. But we basically are going to have an oil problem, a very serious energy problem all around this country. You're going to have food problems. You're going to have all sorts of problems. Life expectancy in the U.S. has gone down. Our healthcare is a mess. We desperately need a redo in this country. And we're not in a position like in the 50s when you saw Sputnik orbiting the globe. You did have the money and the finances. We were the most powerful, possibly the greatest civilization for a very short period of time, maybe 30 years after the war, 25 years after the war, that ever lived, so that you could do a redo. Education, everything went in to putting a man on the moon. And we were the first people to do it. Right now, I heard a guy the other day on one of these channels saying, the answer's right in front of us. It's Jeff Bezos. He's come out with fusion. But fusion's been something we've been talking about for 50 years. You're not going to have fusion unless you have helium-3. And the only place you're going to find enough helium-3 is on the moon. And who's been the only country to make it to the moon and sort of establish a position up there and bring helium-3 back to the Earth? It's the Chinese. It's not the U.S. And without helium-3, no fusion. Jeff Bezos, yeah, he did a great job with Amazon. But as far as creating fusion and the energy that you need to run a modern world, you're not going to have it. And you're not going to have any of this stuff unless the world can come together and cooperate and learn to work together and learn that it's a win-win or lose-lose situation. It's not American exceptionalism as a sports team. I mean, you don't root for America like you root for the Yankees or you root for some British soccer team, which is what we're doing right now. And it is crazy. It is so crazy. And there's a unifier. And Warren Buffett's father put his hand on it. Human freedom. Without human freedom, there's no human creativity. In fact, there's no humanity without human freedom. All we are is just taking orders. We're just like chattel. Government tells us what to do, like Lenin. That's how communism came about. That, destroyed the Russian civilization. It destroyed nearly 1,000 years of civilization, but it destroyed it, buried it. for 150 years. Then you got Putin back.
Yes.
I mean, we're back to right now where we're being run by a deep state. We're not being run by the people that we're voting for. We're the ones that aren't democratic. We are much less so. I mean, we've got to stop this stereotyping. I mean, one thing that, really gets me is all this hatred toward China and Russia. Look, I'll never be part of their culture. I don't want to go to China. I don't want to learn their language, but wow.
Where's that coming from? It's coming from, when you talk about deep state, and we're talking about deep state all over the world in different in different countries, it is centered around the World Economic Forum agenda. And I think one of the big problems for them is Russia threatening because multipolarism threatens everything. And their alliance, Russia's alliance with China, is definitely a problem. And so they'll do anything. It's just, and anyway, just follow the money. Follow the money. Like in anything, it's like in COVID, like in anything. Follow the money, and you'll know that the reason that Russia's been vilified, Russophobia, and Ukraine good, Russia bad, China good, so bad. It's like, this is ludicrous. It's so dumb. It's ridiculous. But people buy into it because it's the narrative. It's the single narrative. And this is the joy of a program like this. This is the joy of listening to you, Stephen, is there is a single narrative out there. What you're doing is dissolving that narrative and saying, hey, put that aside for a minute. And I'm going to give you a view, a deep view, or a wide view of things as they really are playing out. And gold happens to be the catalyst for our entire discussion here. It creates multipolarism. It creates the system. It creates the ability. It creates, even down to an individual who is watching this now, thinks, you know what, I can actually go and buy a bit of gold or a bit of silver, and I'm actually doing my bit for spiritualism. I'm doing my bit to break the system.
Your Kinesis is like a wonderful example of that, where not only can you own gold, but you can use it as an immediate currency for people that But silver too. I mean, it's sort of a poor man's gold, but it still has a role. I mean, most of our history has been bimetallic, but gold has always been there, Andy. 5,000 years of gold, and not an ounce of it destroyed. Yes, the World Economic Forum. I mean, right now, quick calculations, getting right down to brass tacks. If you look at the amount of gold and compare it to other reserve currencies other than the dollar, gold, even at, even if it goes to $3,000, there's still going to be more gold and other reserve currencies than there are dollars in central banks. Gold plus other reserve currencies will be the number one choice. And if gold continues to rise, which I think is extremely likely, and I'm saying that as a prayer, not because I want to get rich owning gold, but I want the world to, succeed. Matter of time, gold will just be number one. And what you're saying about gold becoming a tier one asset, I mean, look, I looked at these. I think Andy Schleckman brought up the idea of, Belt and Road. 143 countries started out in the Belt and Road Initiative. You know how many countries dropped out? That's what's more impressive to me than how many countries are currently in. There are currently 143 countries in it, and they're all going to be trading. And they're all that's the whole idea. It's an infrastructure that unites all 143. China is not about China. China is about China only to the extent that they know China is going to be great if they're part of a great world. Everybody participating. How many countries have dropped out of the Belt and Road? 3. Italy, the Philippines, and Estonia. And Italy is leaning back. I mean, they're ready to join it again. Philippines, yeah, they just had an election in the Philippines, and it wasn't a great choice, but it looks like the Duterte actually came out on top. No one expected that. They could be back in.
And when we talk about gold, I always carry with it, because people, when you talk to people about gold, they kind of like, well, look at you as if, well, yeah, but it's got nothing to do with me. So I say, I hold up, I always carry a sovereign with me, a sovereign in this country, a sovereign. So I could go into a bank in 1930 and exchange that for a pound. Now, if I gave this to someone and they took it to the bank, they get £500 for it. Now, what more do you need to know? Really?
That says it all, but look what happened to America after 1971. It's right there in your face. We have not had a real up year in terms of technology. Our physics stalled. It was like this, and this is the thing too. There's in China, the Chinese author wrote this book called the Three Body Problem. It's a great science fiction story, but one thing that stands out, unlike America, where you always hear how exceptional we are, and anything that we may have done, Madeleine Albright saying that 500,000 children is worth democracy. What kind of democracy do we have in this country when the deep state is making all the decisions? But forgetting about that, even that horrid comparison, in China, getting back to this this story, they're not shuffling anything under the rug. The first scene in this book, there's two versions of this story. And the first scene in the book, written by a Chinese author, is this horrifying scene that took place during the Cultural Revolution. They own up to this. And, I've heard these crazy numbers cited about how many people Mao killed, 70 million. Even if it were 70 million, I think it's more likely 2 million. But any death is one death too many. I mean, it's a horror. But they own up to it in the sense that in both the Chinese version of this story, the book itself, and the American version, they have the most horrid scene from the Cultural Revolution you could have created, where a woman, a leading physicist, is watching her father, her loving father. He was her best student, watching him being clubbed to death during the Cultural Revolution. And this is made by the Chinese. Now, you show me an example of anything like that happening. Do we make movies about My Lai in Vietnam? I haven't seen any movies about that, but you do see it. These people are, they own up to what they do, and people make horrible mistakes, and sometimes they have to do things. But if the culture is there, the civilization is going to come back. America is being tested now like it has never been tested before. You just go back to Eisenhower and you repeat those words. Our most powerful weapon is not our guns. Our nuclear arsenal is a joke today. I hate to say it. Hasn't been updated since 1980. Again, repeating. It's going to cost $1 trillion. You're not going to be, this is the dilemma we have. You want to call it a lose-lose dilemma? I'll give you a lose-lose dilemma. We have the choice. Either try and update our nuclear arsenal and face possibly Weimar Republic type inflation, because that's what will cost us. That's the kind of money we will have to print in order to get a nuclear arsenal that is anywhere near up to date. Without it, we are toast. I mean, not just toast in the sense that Goldman Sachs was toast, except for Buffett, but toast. We basically don't have the defenses. China and Russia, not only do they have these offensive weapons, but their defenses are much more powerful than ours. Iran landed all sorts of hypersonic anywhere they wanted. If they want to, they can do it. They've held back, Andy. We have a chance, and we've got to take it. I mean, it's really important not to get discouraged if, if gold starts going, looking like that it's 2011 again. I mean, you can't avoid trying to think of it's not. And if it is, it's not, it's still not, because it will take everybody with it. It will take everybody with it.
China's now buying, Asia, all the BRICS banks are buying. And as we move into, and Basel III changed the game anyway. And so as we move into the 1st of July, Basel III compliance in the US, which concatenates with the BRICS conference in Rio, what we're going to see is a wholly different situation. So basically, gold is now the glue that holds all of the multipolar world together. China's now just opened up first vault, international facing vault in Hong Kong. And the word is next comes Brazil, Colombia, and the South American countries. All the oil producers will have the ability in 7 seconds, in a 7-second digital yuan, to be able to swap gold for oil. And here's the thing. They've got the physical oil there, but the important thing is, unlike this COMEX marketplace, which is full of paper, before I can trade or even do any business with China, the first thing I have to do is buy a physical bar. It has to be titled to me. I then have to pay fully for it. Now I have the choice to sell it or swap it for oil or another commodity. And that is unlike anything that's going on in the West here. And what we're witnessing today is really a microcosm of what you've been talking about here, which is essentially the demise of the COMEX as the old school, the old way, the old win-lose. And it's the demise of that. And all of that liquidity flows to the physical strength of the BRICS nations. And it's sanction proof.
You mentioned something, 7 seconds. That's how long it takes to settle a trade between one part of the world and another part of the world. Doesn't matter where it's going. And incidentally, I'll say that. Let me just get this thought out. I suffer from ADHD, so I'm all over the place, but usually I know what I'm talking about up to a point. But 7 seconds, how long does it take to settle in SWIFT? 3 days? Okay, what's that a difference in? Technology. Where does that technology difference come from? Creativity. It doesn't mean the Chinese are smarter than us. It doesn't mean Enbridge is something that we could not have created here. Back in 1970, probably 1980, we could have created it. But today we've gone backwards. We don't have the technology to do this. That's the whole point. That's what I'm saying. That's what gold creates. It creates this kind of humanity, of creativity. And here is a kind of ironic example of where our technologies have failed us horribly. Ultimately, in any reasonable world, do you want to settle your transactions over a 3-day period where who knows what can happen? Or do you want to settle them in a 7-second period? I mean, is it a question? It's not a question. It's a rhetorical question.
And delivery is guaranteed. It's not T plus 8 weeks if I go and try and, because they can't deliver it to me. I want physical gold. I want physical silver. It's weeks and weeks out. Or, and technically it should be T plus 1. It'll be T plus 0 because the physical gold bars were already in the vault. They didn't have to run out and buy them afterwards. And therefore you would swap that. So 7 seconds to settle the transaction. Now you've got both in the vault. And it's just shoving it across the floor. Not all this rubbish about where's the jurisdiction that it's held in. Okay, so now we've got to take an EFP out of the COMEX. Now we've got to take it out the back door, put it in the NSFR compliant, Basel III compliant FX markets, where technically it's T plus 1 deliverable, and it is to the likes of China, but it's not T+1 deliverable to an ordinary person.
But
and
it
so
is
this
T+1
interesting.
deliverable to probably Warren Buffett. And if
I'm sure it would be.
If I had to guess, I guess, coming back to where I started, I'm guessing, okay, and I would give odds on it. I would even give, I'm not saying I'd give 10 to 1, but I would give maybe 3 to 2. The guy is sitting there with 2,000 tons of gold. That's about $200 billion worth of gold on his balance sheet. Now, he may have leased it out to the JP Morgans of the world, because right now, JP Morgan, if they want to make a loan, all the collateral that they're going to have with all the gold or whatever they have on their balance sheet that they call gold is maybe 20%. With actual gold on their balance sheet, it's 100%, the collateral. So it's risk-free. And they're going to need it, because without that, the whole system is going to blow up, Andy. We will be printing money just to satisfy our own needs. That's a joke. That is, I mean, have we reached a point that we're so dumb that we don't realize that no one else is going to realize that? I mean, how soon before Japan is selling their own treasury bonds now? I mean, really, it's not China.
This is the exact point, and I think this is probably where we end the episode, because we have to distill it down to a single action, and the single action is, because, as you say, we don't know. Nobody knows, because you've just outlined what is really this clash of cultures. And we don't know where all the pieces will settle. But what we can do, and what we can actually action people to do through this discussion, is to go out, buy a piece of gold, a tiny bit of silver if you can't afford the gold, and actually protect yourself and take an initiative. This is about taking responsibility for ourselves, and so that we can actually help our neighbor. We can have this spiritual thing. So I think that would be a perfect place to just call an end to this episode.
Absolutely agree. We have to earn back our creativity and our humanity. And that's what this is about. You cannot separate the argument for gold with the argument for creativity and humanity. If you don't have gold, and again, forget about me, just focus on human freedom and what Warren Buffett's dad said. And the fact that he was raised in a spiritual home, still has those same beliefs, still has his 93-year-old sister attending his meetings. Basically, and what does he get out of it? If he's right and people are right, he's going to see his balance sheet go from that $200 billion that he's invested in gold. My first calculation, real next stop, is when you back up all the trading with gold, 10,000. That's what you're going to get. That's not necessarily by the end of the year. But if you look at the brick road, and that's a first stop. I'm not talking about backing up GDPs. I'm not talking about backing up all financial assets. You can come up with telephone numbers. $200,000 for an ounce of gold is a possible number. I mean, I'm not predicting that, but there's a very clear equation that says numbers that high. If you look at all the financial assets or the net worth in the world's net worth, and you want to back that up with gold, it would take gold. It would take about six-figure gold to do that. Next stop for gold is 10,000. I think. How about that as a final note, Andy?
That is what we want to. It's about wealth protection. And if it goes to $10,000, or when it goes to $10,000, at some point it will, you will be protected. You will be protected, because what is it going to cost you to buy your food if you with dollars? What's it going to cost you to buy anything if you're not protected? And so I would love to people to listen to this. That final statement from you is that what are you going to do? What is your action you're going to do? And the action would be to protect your wealth now.
All right, there you have it. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Live from the Vault. And a huge thanks to Andrew Maguire, and our featured guest, Dr. Stephen Leeb, for cutting through the noise and sharing insights that you just won't find anywhere else. So if you like this episode, just subscribe and turn on the notifications. You'll never miss out on an episode. And don't forget to share this episode with someone who really needs to hear the real story behind the headlines. So we're back soon with more hard-hitting truths from inside the precious metal space. And until then, thanks for watching. Bye for now.